lot of talk about manhood. You got Andrew Tate out here bumping his gums and Charleston White and all these people telling you what it needs to be a man. There's all this stuff going on in America, man, in the West, and we are going to get into what does the Bible say about being a man? Money, power, and a whole lot of sexual immorality. Like, that's what gets men caught up. I look at how does a man handle his emotions, how does he handle conflict, and how does he handle pressure? You don't need to protect yourself anymore. I've got you. You can take down these walls. I was like, why would I want to do that? All right, welcome back to the Equipped for Life podcast. I'm your host, Brandon C. Ricks, aka B. Ricks in the building. EFLmen.com is the website for you to go find out information about Equipped for Life. As usual, rocking the merch. This is the Ask Me About Jesus tee. If you want to scoop that, EFLmen.com. Thank you so much for all the supporters who've been tuning into the YouTube channel. We continue to see it grow. The shorts are working. Thanks for watching the Charlie Kirk episode. Thanks for watching the genocide episode, as well as the immigration episode. And also, what was the other one? The demons and spiritual warfare war.
That's not come out yet.
Yeah, well, no, that one's already came out.
Oh,
we
really?
got one dropping today. For those of y'all that are listening to this is a week from now, but we got one that's dropping today on the crystals and the that one's dropping today. So so go check that out. And really excited about the content and the topic for today. We're gonna hop into it, and this is about what does it take to be a biblical man. That's right. So a lot of talk about manhood. You got Andrew Tate out here bumping his gums and Charleston White and all these people telling you what it needs to be a man. You got the whole red pill community talking about what it takes to be a man. A lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation, a lot of confused people. You got incel communities. There's all this stuff going on in America, man, in the West, and we are going to get into what does the Bible say about being a man? Should a man cry? Should a man not cry? Should a man have a harem of women? Should he just have one wife? There's all these different things that we could talk about what it means to be a man. But being a biblical man is quite different than just being this machismo man maybe that the West is talking about. And maybe there's also some similarities and things that we'll find that are the same. But with that being said, shout out to Andrew and Andrew, Cool Mo Drew in the building. He's got the shades. He's doing it big today. We got Reese on this side of the camera. He's on the back side of it. You know what I'm saying? So what's happening, Reese? How you feeling, man?
Reese?
Wait a minute. Why am I calling you Reese?
That's funny because my twin brother is named Reese.
He is named Reese?
I always get called Reese. So just like that, back I was like,
Reed. Wait a minute. I know a Reese though. Like, oh yeah, Reese is my buddy's brother. And so, yeah. So, Reese,
I would have ever worked for you. Huh?
I've got a Reese and a Reed in my life, man. You know, it's like, it's a little bit confusing.
Imagine, like,
it's kind of like having a Jaden and a Jalen, you know? It's like, you know, it's kind of similar.
Yeah, definitely. No, my mom would just go, Reed, and like, we would both come.
Yeah, you will. Yeah, she would just not even say the ES or the ED. Yeah, just say Reed and y'all will come. Okay, I love it. Well, you know what? Let's hop into what does it mean. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Jay. Jay is behind the camera. Jay Simone in the building. You know, this one, we couldn't let her in the front. We're talking about what does it to be a biblical man.
The topic I came with.
She can't be, well, you know, you can identify as whatever you want in America now. So you could be a non...
I just can't speak on this topic.
You could be a. You could be a.
I think it's your perspective as a woman. Like, what?
I think I mean, we're gonna be talking about a lot of different things and like ideologies. I think having a female's perspective,
it would be good. You know what I'm saying? So she behind the camera, she can chime in if she needs to be. We don't got no camera on her though, but it's all good. You know, we can just. You know, we know that she's here. All right, so. What does it take to live as a biblical man, right? Like, I know, Reed, that you brought this up. You want to kind of kick us off with it?
Yeah, for sure. So culture defines masculinity in 1,000 different ways: power, money, silence, dominance. But what does Scripture say about it, and what it means to be a man? Let's start simple. I was just wondering, what do y'all think when y'all hear the term biblical masculinity, and like what comes to mind?
Andrew.
I think of David.
Okay.
And I think about who David was. We call him a man after God's heart. You see David as kind of this more of a what I would define as like an emotional guy. You see David crying. You see David in a lot of pain. You see David very expressive. Person, but David is very strong. He's very powerful. And he's faithful. And he's during his younger years more of an honorable man. And so that's what I think of.
Interesting. Andrew Tate would say haram. Because David was very emotional. I saw this interview with Andrew Tate, and the famous harlot Bonnie Blue. All right. And they had this interview, right? And they listen, if you don't know who Bonnie Blue is, good. Mind your business.
We should have her on the podcast.
No, we should. You know what? That would be an interesting conversation. I mean, it would be very boring, I'll be honest, because she's kind of atheistic in her thinking, so it wouldn't be very interesting. It'd be a short conversation. But the interviewer was talking to them both, and he asked them, when's the last time you cried? And it was like this very machismo, like, I can't remember the last time I cried, right? Like, he gave this, very red pill kind of answer to when the last time he cried. But you look at David was a very emotive individual. And so it's interesting to say that your example, your first thought is David as an idea of biblical masculinity. What about you, Reed?
That's different. I think I don't really think of like a specific person, I guess. But for me, when I think of biblical masculinity, I think of someone who shines the light of Jesus in their everyday actions, specifically when they are doing what a man should do. I know that's kind of, subjective, but providing for your family, right? Mm-hmm. Protecting your spouse and your kids, right? I think, someone who their whole point of their life is to serve and respect others, I guess. It's like, that's kind of like what I think like a biblical man should be, I guess.
Interesting. Now, I have a question for the two of you in your personal lives. Where have you seen, let's say, the ideal example of a man play out in your own life? Like, what image do you have as whether it's a father, or a teacher, coach, whatever else? Like,
we were actually kind of we were joking about it before the podcast, but for me, my father has been pretty absent in my life, so I never had a consistent role model for me until my stepdad came in. Till I was about, I think I was in like 4th grade or something. But for me, my stepdad was, he runs a company, the Shepherd Staff. Sorry, probably shouldn't plug, but basically his whole job is like finding pastors and other church leader. I'm like blanking on the names, but find like people to work at churches and stuff. And they're like, yeah. So he's very different from my biological father, and just the way he treats my mother, the way he's, treated me, not being biologically related to him. That is something I strive to be. I want to be like my stepdad.
Interesting.
Because he's, no matter what, he's always been, you are important, you are loved, you are special, right? Just like very caring and,
he's kind, he's compassionate, he's caring, and he treated you like he was you were his own son.
Yeah.
And that what's interesting about that too is this. My father was also that way with my sister. She and I don't have the same biological father, but she's now by law legally adopted, if you will, right? So we have the same rights. And this is what's interesting about the Word of God too as well. You see that God has adopted us as sons. We are heirs to the throne, and we've been grafted in to the family of the Most High God. And there's this theme of adoption, right? That there is the biological nature of the son-father issue doesn't necessarily have to be bloodline, right? But the examples that you have of what biblical masculinity doesn't sound like what the modern day age masculinity sound like in terms of being compassionate, kind, caring, loving? What say you, Andrew? Your example.
My example for me for sure was my father. One thing I noticed about my parents and I appreciate was that they took on a lot of responsibility when they were younger. And that was something that my dad did. My dad always, took care of a lot of people. He took care of his siblings. He took care of his little nieces and nephews, and he was always a person that you could rely on. He was a dad and a father to many people. And so having that as an example for my life and having that as an example of what true service looks like, is it doesn't benefit you. It doesn't feel good. A lot of times it's suffering, it's hard, but he still went out every day, worked extremely hard and helped all these people, he gets to, reap the benefits from it in a bit, Some people's children call him granddad, Some people's children call him uncle, And so it's, that was like my big example.
Interesting. So both of you guys had fathers that were the greatest examples of biblical masculinity, if you will. And I think that's paramount, especially in a day and age and a generation where people don't value the presence of a father. It sounds like for both of you that it's masculinity looks like showing up, being present, and also a big part of it is provision. You both talked about there was a level of provision and taking care of. What's interesting about it is that you didn't necessarily use financial terms to talk about that provision, which is what most people, I think, associate masculinity with, is being a high earner, high value man, right? High net worth, 6-7 figure earner. And that's what equates to masculinity. So the way that your fathers provided for you, I'm sure it was financial, but it doesn't sound like the financial aspect was the most important thing to you.
No, definitely. For me, something, the biggest thing I have learned from my stepdad is communication. And that is something that I have really, that's something I pride myself in, is my ability to communicate with other people, working. I don't pride myself on that. I pride myself on how I'm striving to get to that point where I feel comfortable, just laying out there what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking, and clearly being able to have an adult conversation with somebody else and see their side, understand my side. That was something my stepdad was very, good about, implementing into us when we were younger and stuff. So,
yeah, for me, finance has nothing to do with it, right? The example that was always laid out for me by the men in my life was providing looks like being a nurturer, even though in a sense that's kind of what we look at women as typically, right? But providers are nurturers, they're carers, they're there for their wife. They set an example, through their wife of caring for her, taking care of the things that she needs, right? Whether that be her emotions, whether that be things that she needs help with, that is the example that, I look at.
Yeah. So one of the things that we look at, for me, I look at how does a man handle his emotions, how does he handle conflict, and how does he handle pressure, right? Those things to me is how you identify whether a man is living biblically or not. Because when you see the examples of individuals that either found themselves in situations where they fell short, it's typically in those areas, right? Yeah. And I look at David as a perfect example, right? When you see David and when he kind of fell into sexual immorality with Bathsheba in his older years as a king, he was obviously in the wrong place. He was out of pocket, and he found himself in scenarios where he fell short of God's divine purpose and will for his life. but there was a level of repentance that he had to as well. There's a couple things that I have that I want to kind of talk about here when we look at this concept of biblical masculinity. You know, one again is these ideas of self-control, because I think that is a big thing for men. Like if you meet a man, I'm sure that you probably met a man in your life that was like out of control. Okay, and you're like, whoa, this person is toxic, volatile. Even if they had what we would call like bravado, like, you know, they could fight, you know, whatever else. It's like, no, having the ability to scrap doesn't mean that we scrap all the time with everybody. And we've all been around dudes like that, and the society will say, oh yeah, those guys are men, those are real men, they can box. It's like, no. You got to be able to have power with control, right? Jesus was meek. He wasn't weak. Okay?
That was hard. I'm not gonna lie, that was low-key hard.
Like, he was, like, seriously though, he was meek. He wasn't weak. Like, he low-key, like, he could just destroy everybody if he wanted to, right? Yeah. He chose not to. You know, people slap him in his face. He's like, all right, I'm good with that, right? Like, I could just like turn you to dust right now, but I'm gonna be reserved. And even when Peter cut off the temple guard's ear, he rebuked Peter and healed the man's ear. He said, I didn't come with a sword, right? Like, I will one day come back and you're gonna see what it's about, you know, but that's not right now. It's having the ability to be reserved, you know, it's controlled power. And I like this verse from Galatians chapter 5, 22 and 23. It says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And the theme is that the self-control is evidence of spiritual maturity and alignment with the Holy Spirit. And to me, a real man knows how to be controlled. Is controlled under pressure, is controlled when things get difficult, when things get hard, when things are not going his way. You can tell a lot about a person, not just a man, but about a person, okay, about how they act when things don't go their way.
I agree.
I mean, I totally agree. I think that's like the root of, you know, I guess toxic masculinity, and like especially today's society is just men who don't know how to process what they're feeling or thinking, and so they lash out on women and children who can't stand up for themselves.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I want to flip it back. I want to flip it back on you, especially your journey with how you, because your story is interesting. You know, from who you were when you were younger to now. How have you kind of grown in that? Being more self-controlled, being more disciplined as a man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, one of the things for me I struggled with was anger. Like, anger was rough, man, because I just was a very anger and mad person. So something happened when I got saved. It's like my disdain for life was kind of taken away, but the residual effects of like living a life angry remained. Mm. You know, so I had to kind of relearn how to interact and deal with people because what I realized is that I was using anger as a shield to protect myself from other people. Yeah. So it was me projecting strength, right? So I became like the, you know, I wish a MF would kind of person, right? Like perpetual, like don't cross my boundaries, like. You know, like I've got like, you know, I got machine guns, like mortar rounds on my boundaries, like waiting for somebody to cross my boundaries, right? But I did that to protect myself from being hurt, you know? And when I got closer to the Lord and he began to break down just kind of the walls of my heart, and he said, like, you don't need to protect yourself anymore. I've got you. You can take down these walls. And I was like, why would I want to do that? You know, this has been my modus operandi for years. Like that's dangerous. That's scary to take down these walls that have respectfully provided me with a lot of protection. I've saved myself and kept myself away from people that would try to harm me because I was very, very serious about being respected and people not disrespecting my boundaries, right? But the new man and the new life in Christ, God wanted me to be vulnerable so that I could show love to people, so that I could relate to people, so that I could be more in tune with my emotions and not just express things in anger. And so once I surrendered that it opened up a new perspective for me. It changed my paradigm on how I saw the world. So one of the things that I look at is the verses about anger. James chapter 1, verse 19 and 20 says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. And that really convicted me, is that anger can be justified, right? That's the reason why it says, in your anger, do not sin. Ephesians chapter 4, 26 through 27. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. Anger, that emotion, creates vindictiveness. It creates bitterness, resentment. It creates the desire for revenge. And when you're living in that emotional state, it's really toxic for your own well-being. It's like putting poison in a wellspring, right? You're putting something in fresh water that makes all the water undrinkable. And I found myself to be very much undrinkable, if you will, right? Like people could not palate me because I was living in so much anger that once I released that, I became a much more biblically sound individual. And I believe that that's what's made me more of a man. I tell people, in my life now that I think that I've shed more tears and cried in the last couple of years than I have in my entire life. And for me, it's been an odd thing because things have moved me to compassion that wouldn't move me before. Now, Jay can, Jay Simone is, she lives in the household with me, so maybe she can give you some insight whether I'm capping or not. She can tell you the deal, if she wants to.
I would say yes. I felt change. Sometimes he can still be very, very stern in his delivery, which he lives in a house full of women mostly, and then so me, my mother, and my sister. So sometimes we can perceive him very harsh, and we have to tell him like, "Hey, you're being a little mean." But over the years, I can definitely see that he's gotten very softer in his delivery and how he speaks to people, and just become more like, I want to say from 2020 to now, or even before 2020, it's like a major difference. Like I'm looking at like a whole new father as of now than how he was before 2020, and even in those times of COVID, and how I tell people is that the Brandon you're talking to now is not the Brandon I knew years ago.
So am I less or more manly now?
I would say you're more manly because you dropped your walls.
And see, but that's not what society would say, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I also we like you were saying, but like we see Jesus weep with like the brokenhearted, like specifically, like I wrote it down, John 11:35, Jesus wept. Like that's all it is. Like I just think that is so powerful. Like the King of Kings, right, is on his knees, showing the most vulnerable emotions that we feel, right? Because I think the context behind that is like I forget exactly what happened, but like someone died and he's like crying with them. Lazarus. Yeah, it was Lazarus. That's what it was. Like so, like and it's just I think that's so interesting. I have a question though. I want to kind of going back to what you were talking about. With your past, this may be personal, but do you think you might have, I guess, learned those like toxic ways and or do you think you came into that? If that makes sense. No,
I think that there are things that are just your natural presets. I've always been a very strong-willed person. I mean, I can remember as a kid in preschool, I got kicked out of preschool. All right, like I don't know if y'all know anybody that got kicked. I got kicked out of preschool because I was just I've always been very much a no person. No, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I don't believe you. I don't trust you. I'm not doing it. So I've always been a little bit contrarian in that way, to where I challenge the source of information and the source of ideas. So, but so for me, being kind of stern is not the same as being volatile. The volatility came honestly through life experiences where I felt that I had to put up walls, specifically when I moved to Indiana. I wasn't really an angry kid I was a rambunctious kid when I grew up in California, but when I went to Indiana, I became an angry person because I experienced a lot of prejudice. I experienced a lot of racism. I experienced a lot. It was a cultural shock. And since I was already a kid that was just fine with speaking my piece, I was just fine with protecting myself, I just turned it up, all the way. And I was in school suspension. I was in out of school suspension. I was in detention. I got in fights. I had cops come to my house because I was not to be played with. And I was very, very serious about that. And what happened is that it turned me into a bitter, spiteful, angry person. That's what happened to me, So, and you learn violence too as well. I'm the first generation of my family out of the ghetto. All right. All of my cousins, all of my family grew up in the hood. I was the only one that didn't. So some of that is residual, So I didn't have to necessarily grow up in an impoverished environment to learn that if you play with somebody, it's going to be consequences to that. That's a very hood mentality. You don't find that mentality in affluent spaces, in places. You find that in more impoverished environments where there is a real consequence for testing somebody. You're going to find out that you don't test people. And so some of that is learned. Some of that is experiential knowledge. Some of that is, again, what I felt like I needed to do in order to survive in a period of time when you're coming of age and you're, growing in teenage years and you're trying to figure out your way. And you're doing that all while being what feels like attacked on a daily basis just for being a different color skin. And so that's kind of how it played out for me.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. For me personally, I've been very, very fortunate from where I grew up, from where I've lived, that I haven't been in a situation like you were when you were a kid, but I think I was almost taught this idea that I, don't show emotion. Like I would get, people would be like, you're being too sensitive. You're crying. You're doing this. And I think that's just something that, even in schools is kind of, forced down our throat as men. Just like, don't feel, shut it off. And I actually have this video of this guy who, you kind of started off on this weird tangent, but basically he tells this story of him in youth group and how his youth pastor would tell him don't feel your feelings. Just
what, the youth pastor out here telling lies? So come on, youth pastor.
I wanted to show us all.
This is wild work.
It's pretty interesting. So little context. This video he made was for a nasty comment someone left on his video, and it was another. So he's a pastor, and another pastor commented on his Instagram video.
Pastor on pastor violence? We got to stop. We got to stop. Christians in America need to stop, bro. Y'all are some wild ones, man.
It goes onto our topic
just
because it was
crazy.
The comment was nice lipstick man or something when this guy did this video and he just had Aquaphor on it. So it was just very silly, very stupid. So this guy is just kind of talking about how there's a sense of toxic masculinity in the church and in our,
Let's see. One of the things that I do want to talk about while Reed's getting that worked out is handling conflicts and disagreements. I see a lot of men having issues with conflict and disagreements and not being able to resolve things. I mean, there's literally gangs that have had beef with each other over 30-year-old ridiculous conflicts that could have been resolved with a simple conversation. And so once I want to get into that too a little bit as well. And we may have to get into that now if since Reed's video ain't working.
In that youth group, there was a leader whom I looked up to greatly. And commonly, he would make these little jokes, little insults to me. And when I'd acknowledge or display resistance to these kinds of jokes, the response would always be, hey, lighten up. Learn to take a joke. I'm just kidding. Quit being so sensitive. Things like that. Now, I do empathize with this leader to an extent because predictably, as an insecure teenage boy, I would compensate for my insecurities in ways many teenage boys think they should, in ways that were modeled for us. So I was very loud, very outgoing, and I could dish out the insults myself pretty well. Now, I don't expect my teenage peers at that time to have the emotional maturity to see what's going on there and react accordingly, but for this adult leader with whom I had a very close relationship, I wish he had had the discernment to see what was going on there under the surface, because I didn't need someone to toughen me up and teach me how to push down my feelings and pretend like those hurtful words didn't affect me. No, I needed my spiritual leader to help me understand my identity in Christ, because the solution for my insecurities wasn't tougher skin, it was a foundation in Jesus. I didn't know who I was. I didn't like who I was most of the time. What I needed was a leader to acknowledge those insecurities and sensitivities and help me to see why they existed and point me to the healthy solution. Instead, often I got a spiritual leader that was trying to, in his words, knock me down a peg because he misunderstood my bravado as arrogance when in fact it was compensation for shame.
Wow.
Why? How much of this, like this like toxic masculinity or whatever is not arrogance but shame? I'm embarrassed for who I am. I'm embarrassed. I'm not bringing in this certain amount of money.
Yeah.
It's not an excuse by any means. I think but it just comes down to educating our young men on how to. I guess not you just educating people on feelings are so real.
Yeah.
Right?
They are. You know what? But it's interesting too, right? Because there are a lot of dudes in this generation, man. Y'all's generation, there's some soft dudes, man. Yeah. And so for me, I want to be empathetic at the same time. Like I encounter some weak dudes that don't know how or haven't been taught how to be men. And
can I ask you? I need you to expound upon that a little bit. What do you see that is weak? What do you see that?
I think that there's a generation of Americans, not just your age group, but across the board, that have embraced cowardice as a way of living. I think that I have never seen a nation of people more cowardly in my life than this current state of American population. It is outlandish to me to see the amount of people that are afraid to look you in the eye and say what they need to say. They run from conflict. They will go on with their little Twitter fingers and post, but they won't have the audacity to say that to your face. Yeah. Okay? To me, I think that is an indictment on the country as a whole, and specifically young men who have been encouraged that you can hide behind your feelings, or you can, not be truthful with what's going on. And I don't subscribe to that perspective. I think that you've got to have the courage to say what what did Kevin Hart say with your chest, right? Say it with your chest, right? It's funny, but it's no, we as men have to be able to deal with difficult things. Yeah. You can't go into a marriage, for example, right, and expect that you're going to have somebody lead when you're afraid to confront things. Sometimes we as men, quite truthfully, we're kind of left alone to deal with the problems that we have. Because women don't often empathize with some of the struggles that we have. And in fact, when you tell your wife or your spouse some things, sometimes it ends up getting worse because it just gives them anxiety because they don't have the tools to be able to deal with it, which is the reason why Equip for Life, EFL, is so powerful, because men can come together and have discussions with other men to work through some of the things that only a man will understand. But you have to face those things head on with courage. You can't cower away from them.
Yeah.
I would like to say something. I agree what my dad just said, because in my mind, I know men, especially from my father, being head on and telling you how you feel. And I had a situation with a guy friend of mine, who didn't tell me the truth, said that, and then he was gossiping. Now, this is something females need to work on themselves, but females love to gossip. We like to not say how we truly feel to everybody else, and we like to go around to everybody else, and then it blows out of proportion. So when I was in this situation, I was thinking to myself, why is this guy acting like a female? Why is he acting like a female when he should be, if he claims himself to be a man, he should tell me how he's feeling. You know what I'm saying? So in my mind, I didn't know how to navigate that because in this situation, I'm a very headstrong person. I like to, most of the time, especially when it comes to friends, I tell my friends how I feel, and that's that. It's blank. I don't care how if I hurt their feelings, because I'm telling them how I feel. So in my mind, I felt like I'm coming on strong to this dude. I'm like, hey, what's wrong with you? This is how I feel. And he would basically lie to my face and be like, no, we're all good. So how, as a female, how do you navigate that specifically to another man?
You know what? Like, I don't know, man. Because again, like I wasn't raised like that. I was raised in a household that we were taught to come and address a problem. And this is why I think that the conflict resolution is a big deal, because you have men that either they cower and they run away from conflict, which creates problems because you end up, that's how I think you end up with serial killers. I think that's how you end up with school shooters. Real talk. Right? From dudes that refuse to address the fact that they have a problem. They won't stand up to the bully. They won't address the issue. They suppress. And then before you know it, they're shooting up a school. Like, I think that that's a part of it. And then on the contrary, in impoverished environments where you have, predominantly Black and Hispanic populations, that's why you see gun violence. We don't know how to talk through it. I'm going to just pull out the blicky and I'm going to just, shoot you. You know what I'm saying? We working around with sticks, like that's what we do. Like, we can't actually resolve. It's just immediately volatility, and now we killing people. Right? So whether you have the suppression of emotion because you can't handle a thing, or you're having the overt expression of emotion because you can't handle a thing, they're both a sign to me of immaturity. Okay. And it's not biblical manhood. So I want to look at a couple of these things, handling conflict and disagreement. And then let's look at a couple of examples of when men didn't handle things properly and control themselves and display godly principles and godly masculinity, how it turned into their fall. One of the things that it says, Matthew 18:15, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. Like, this is the Messiah speaking. This is a standard for us as Christians. In Romans 12, verse 18, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. If this is taking a personal accountability, responsibility to be a peacemaker, right? Now, a peacemaker is not appeasement. It's a very big difference. There are a lot of people pleasers out there that say, I'm just trying to keep the peace. No, you're not. You're just not confronting the issue, right? And you're masking it as peacemaking in order to make yourself feel good, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to say something. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable. Proverbs 15:1. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger.
I had that one written down too.
You did? Yeah. So this is like the tone matters, right? Responding with gentleness, not escalation. There should always be the intention of resolution when you're having conflict. Yeah. If you're coming into the scenario with the intent to tear down or to hurt, then yes, don't say anything. But for me personally, I don't just talk to hear myself talk. Like, I want to resolve the thing. So I'm willing to get into the trenches with you, to work through difficult conversations, because at the end of the day, if I love you, I want it to be resolved. I want the thing that's causing dissension or tension to be wiped away, okay? Not just suppressed or put in the corners for no one to address or act like it's not there. The old elephant in the room adage, if you will. What are your thoughts about that, gentlemen?
I mean, yeah, I think that's kind of comes down to what we've been talking about, is just like the root of the problem is men just suppressing. I think that kind of, I think when guys don't know how to like deal with conflict specifically, like, I mean, look at marriages and stuff. Like, I mean, I'm not married, so I don't know, but from what you've told me, from what I've heard listening to, the men in this group, who are in marriages and stuff, it's communication. There's going to be fights, there's going to be conflicts and stuff, but it's all about how you approach the situation and how you approach it with, humility, vulnerability. And, I think, like you said, I think there's a lot of guys that just will refuse to ever let themselves I don't know if it's get down to that level or open themselves up, or they don't want to be that vulnerable with anybody.
You can't get there without Christ, man.
Yeah.
You can't get there without Christ. It's not gonna happen. Because if what's gonna either happen is that you're gonna go join the incels, or you're gonna go join Andrew Tate.
Take a red pill.
Yeah.
You're gonna go join Andrew Tate. Like that's what's gonna happen. You're gonna get so bitter because there's a lot of heavy weight on men, and we don't talk about it enough, right? Because we're in an age where it's kind of like a man's value is associated with how much money he can provide.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not bringing money to the table, then you have no value. You know, if you're not 6 foot tall and you got 6 figures, then you're not a valuable individual to Christian society. You know, so like these things unfortunately are being propagated, and men are judging themselves, and the phones and social media and the trap of comparison does not help, because men are getting their value from what they see online, and they're honestly getting their value from ungodly women. I want to hear real quick, just a quick little nugget here from Jaden, like from your perspective, right? Like you obviously grew up with a father in the household. When you're out here in these streets, if you will, right? Like
Streets is crazy.
like what? How often do you encounter what you would describe as a biblically based godly man?
In my mind, when I look in a man, I see someone who has God as his foundation, someone who has a plan, someone who I know that could be a safe space, can provide for me, and when it gets there to provide for my kids, not financially. I honestly don't care about money like that. As long as we have a roof over our head and we're joyful, it doesn't really matter to me. So when I go out into the world and I see there's very, very few men who are, in my mind, biblically godly, like in safe, because there's a lot of men who struggle with, like you said, oh, I need to be 6 foot, or I need to be this much money, and a lot of that has to do with females. Like we do have this idea of, I want him. Even some of my friends who are not Christians, they're like, I need my man to be this, that, and third. And I'm like, whoa, guys, like that's a lot of requirements. I mean, obviously there's standards that obviously everybody probably has, but that's a lot of requirements. That's a lot of pressure on men to live up to those standards, that they have to be like this, they have to do this, they have to do this. And if you just have those 3 things, you're secure, you know what you want to do in your life, you're godly, and you provide. I feel like those 3 things in itself is godly. So you wouldn't have to like.
Yeah.
That's my view on it. I mean, females do not help. I will say females do not help. We do put a lot of pressure on y'all, especially like there was one time this guy opened to him in school. He started crying and I had no clue what to do. I was like, oh, whoa. I don't. When females cry, it's like a protection over them, like you want to protect them. But when men cry, it's like we don't know what to do. And I was in that situation where I don't know what to do with you. Like I don't know what to do.
That's what I was telling y'all earlier, is that, that's why it's like sometimes you can't bring those things to women, because they're not because we're expected to be the rock and the foundation.
Right. This is a conversation I actually had with some friends actually recently, is that I was looking at my my friends that my girlfriends are, and we were talking, and I said, I think oftentimes women struggle with holding space for men. Like, it's the truth. Like, we will listen, we'll be there, we'll be as active as we can within like our friendships, within our relationships with y'all, and we will be that rock. But when it comes to handling like our emotions, how we feel, and seeing us on that, oftentimes what I've seen is kind of I don't want to say repulsion per se. I do want to say like I've seen kind of like them backing away, kind of afraid with dealing with that thing, and then you come out of that situation with that person and your perspective of them changes. You know, some people have been good, and some people have been better at being able to like hold space. You know what I mean? Recently, you know, as we've started to kind of have more of these conversations, but like it is still a struggle that I've seen for people to really get there. What's up? Oh, it was my bad. But it is a struggle for, you know, people to get to that place of like genuinely holding space.
Yeah. Well, if you want, you know, these examples of where men found themselves on the opposite side, right, of being a biblical man. Cain, perfect example, Genesis chapter 4. Samson is a big example. Judges chapter 14 through 16. You can read that, gentlemen, if you want to, and how Samson repeatedly acted on impulse, repeatedly, over and over again in an arrogant way. Solomon, okay, toward the end of his life. Okay,
Wasn't he that guy who had like multiple wives that had like different?
Solomon had more wives and concubines than what makes any sense. Like, I mean, I don't even know what you do with all them women at a certain point.
Which I think is very interesting. I mean, the reason why I'm bringing this up, I had Solomon written down in his story. I just think it's very interesting because, like, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't he a very godly man, like earlier in his like?
Yeah, he was the wisest man on earth, and then he allowed himself to be pulled into building idols, temples to please and placate to his wives.
Do you think that was to please himself? And
no,
his
it was
desires?
definitely to please. The scripture says that he was pretty much placating to his wives. He got old to the place because Solomon loved foreign women. Okay, so, you know, this is a whole other topic for another day, but the Hebrews, the Israelites, were explicitly told not to marry and make babies with women that were not Hebrews. Okay, Solomon did not listen to any of that. All right, and he decided to go get everything but a Hebrew woman. So he had wives and concubines from all the people and tribes and nations all around, okay, Israel. And he was inflamed with lust for foreign women. And a lot of those women, they did not worship Yahweh. They worshiped all different types of gods. And when he would bring them into the land of Israel, they would long for their homeland, and they would begin to ask him to allow them to build temples to their gods in Israel. And he began to, you know, placate to that, and then he even started going to some of the temples with his wives, right? So he was punished as a result of that. So that's what happened to Solomon. So listen, man, the devil has been using the same things, okay, to trap up and trip men for thousands of years. It's the same playbook: power, money, and women. Look at, you see old boy, the CEO, they just got hemmed up over there at the Coldplay concert. Did y'all see that?
Yeah.
I saw that.
Oh my gosh, goodness gracious. Yeah, like he's over here snuggle bust with the head of HR, which is the head of HR is supposed to be like the head of ethics.
Crazy.
And she's in here with the CEO all snuggled up out in public, you know, but again, like look at P. Diddy. Money, power, and a whole lot of sexual immorality. Yeah. Like that's what gets men caught up, you know? Okay, so another just example of a man taking out his pain, and not properly expressing emotions. King Saul, 1 Samuel chapter 18. Saul was very angry. He took it out on David, tried to kill David, tried to throw the spear at him and pin him up against the wall, was in pursuit of David because he couldn't handle the fact that God had rejected him and was going to take him off of the throne. And so instead of just recognizing that I messed up, I have moral failings, I'm going to take it out on David, right? And this is, again, that passive, you know, aggressive type of behavior. So I kind of want to close out with this kind of reflection for our listener. And this goes back to your point, Reed, is that biblical masculinity isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about surrendering them to God, right? And when you asked me earlier, like what changed, is that's what happened. I got on my knees and started to surrender to God and started to ask for help and to understand the bevy of emotions and to be able to have the discernment and the wisdom of who to share certain things with and when to share certain things with, you know, at what times. You know, so when men fail to rule their emotions rule them at the end of the day. When men take out pain on others, they corrupt relationships, leadership, and their legacy. And so biblical masculinity to me is really humility and submission to God at the end of the day. Because when you submit and surrender to God, your ability to resolve conflict improves, your ability to control your emotions improves, your ability to be compassionate improves, to have empathy, and you become like God, who himself is an embodiment of a provider, of a nurturer, of a wise leader and teacher, and of wise counsel. Yeah. And that is biblical masculinity. You've been listening to Equip for Life, EFLmen.com. I'm Brandon C. Ricks. Reed in the house, Andrew G, Jay Simone behind the camera today. Once again, be blessed and be strong on your journey. Peace.